Automating Google Sheets and the rest of Google Workspace with OpenBots and RPA. Welcome, Cameron, to the stream,
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
and welcome to you, viewers out there. This session is for you. So, when you see anything you don't understand in this session or anything you want to know more about RPA, OpenBots, and automating Google Workspace, just ask all the much that you want in the chat. Cameron, what do you have for us today?
So, today we're going to be doing a nice walkthrough of how you can go ahead and automate Google Workspace, just like you said. For anyone that's gone ahead and automated anything in the Azure platform or done Microsoft 365 automation, this is going to feel very familiar in its overall setup and flow. We do have some wonderful workshops on that as well that can be referenced. Um, we're going to touch a couple of our different tools today, do a little bit of cloud server. Primarily, we're going to be working out of our OpenBot studio today. And although our production version right now is version 1.8.6, today we're going to be getting a little bit of a preview because our Google Workspace automation capability actually comes out with our version 2.0 that's coming out within the next couple of weeks. You should see some more announcements about that around our upcoming conference that we're doing.
So, we have a premiere here on the stream today.
Yeah, I like to show the flashy stuff. It's always been my preference to show off what's coming. I think it makes a more engaging demonstration.
Nice. Cameron, we will watch what you have for us.
Fantastic. So here we have our OpenBot Studio software up on the screen right now. On the left side here, you can see that I already have our Google Workspace commands installed and ready to go. But if you need to go ahead and install these, you can get these from the OpenBots package manager. Right now, I have these reading out of a local feed that I've configured just because I'm loading things ahead of time. You can see our Google Workspace commands here. We're also going to be touching the rebranded cloud commands, which are going to be our platform commands. Just a bit of a name change there as we've expanded out what we have available in them. So when we're talking about automating Google Workspace, first and foremost, you need to get access to a set of credentials and a client API key and secret. This is very similar to what you encounter in Microsoft 365. Google's preferred format for that is a JSON file that they give you out of their cloud console. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the cloud console here. I've just logged into a brand new created Gmail account that I made just for this. It does not have any associated fees or anything that you need to pay up front. So anyone with a Gmail account should be able to hop right into this. So to create a new project, it's as simple as going here and selecting new project, providing it a name. And in this case, we don't have a location because we're a very normal out of the box organization. I'm going to be working out of my demo project today. So going to the left side here, we have our APIs and services bucket. This is what we're going to be interacting with in the Google Cloud Console. We can go to the OAuth consent screen. And here we would go ahead and configure out the initial OAuth application. So here, I'm actually going to go ahead and do that fresh for you guys. So we'll make a new project. We'll call it my demo project. And now that's going to take just a second to create, usually about 30 seconds for Google to register everything in their backend. And we're going to load right back up. Go.
Did you actually set up a virtual machine just for this demo, Cameron?
I do have a VM that I generally use for my demos that I'm using for this. I tend to repurpose, but it's a pretty clean environment, leads to a very good experience. You don't have to worry about any weird pop-ups.
Very nice.
So in our newly created project, you're going to see that we've been provided a couple options when configuring this OAuth consent screen. Because we're not an internal organization, we can only choose external here. We got to give our application a name, just call this my app name, and we have to give a user support email because there's only one email associated with our organization. Everything's going to get pre-filled out pretty easily here. A developer contact email. We can do openbotsdemo@gmail.com. And now we can save and continue. At this point, we're asked to include any scopes that we want to give permissions to. We don't have to do anything here up front. And then to provide some test users. So in this case, our test user is just going to be ourselves.
So what you're setting up here is like so we can get access into Google Workspace directly.
Exactly.
So we don't have to use UI automation, but we can just do it directly instead. Is that correctly understood from my side?
Yes, sir. So what this is an alternative to using a username and password combination. Many cloud platforms nowadays just simply don't support providing a username and password to get that initial login done. You need to go ahead and configure some form of OAuth authentication. When we're talking about Microsoft 365, that's setting up a client secret, getting an application in a tenant ID. In the case of Google Cloud, it's configuring this OAuth consent and then downloading a credential file. So
Cool.
going to credentials here, we would go ahead and create a set of credentials. In this case, we'll create an OAuth client ID. We're going to say that we're doing a desktop application. You can name it absolutely whatever you'd like. It's just for referencing. And at this point, we've been given a client ID in secret. We can go ahead and download the JSON of that and use that in our automations. I'm going to immediately delete that because that provides access to my organization to anybody watching.
Yeah, we have a 40-second delay here, Cameron, so don't worry.
It's fine. I trigger the delete and there's nothing important here. Yep, there we go. Okay, so swapping back to our primary app, our demo project here, we can see that I already have this credential here created called demo app. This is the same one that's currently downloaded in my studio. In addition, I've already gone ahead and enabled some APIs and services. Now, this is a very critical step. Just like providing permissions in the Microsoft platform, you need to actually authorize any users accessing your Google Cloud to use certain applications. You can simply click Enable APIs and Services and then go to screens like this right here for Google Forms, where rather than a manage, you'll have the ability to say authorize. And generally speaking, I recommend you do Docs, Forms, Sheets, Drive, Gmail, the core stuff that we provide commands for in our studio. Once you have all that completed, you're ready to go.
Great. And if I may interrupt, RPA consultant Eric Paris says hi from Porto, Portugal. Hi, Eric. Welcome to the stream. And back to you, Cameron.
Perfect. So hopping right in, we're going to need to drag in our create session command first. So as with many of our different integration platforms, we like to manage things through a session variable, keeps things nice and neat. So in this case, our app name is going to be my demo app. And we just need to provide some variable for our Google Workspace instance. I'm just going to call this Google Inst. You can hit Control K in any field in our studio to open up this quick helper. It'll pre-fill whatever variable type you need at the time. And now we need to provide a credential file path. I can just click Select a file, double click on Google Credentials, and that'll pre-fill out right there. Now, once I have this Google Workspace create session command, I can go ahead and create whatever I need next. Now, what we're going to be demonstrating today is how to take input from a Google form that I've already pre-created here for collecting customer payment information and place it into a Google Sheet, which I have available here in my Google Drive. You can see our Google Drive state right here. And this includes the customer data as well as some other documents I'll go through if we have time today. So what we need to do is we need to retrieve this Google Sheets Drive item from our Google Drive. What that'll allow us to do is actually reference that, and rather than create a new Google Sheets spreadsheet, we'll go ahead and open an existing one. So what I like to do is go ahead and place a couple comment commands because it allows me to buffer out my code and make things look nice and neat as we go through. And we're going to go back to our Google Workspace package, go under Sheets, and then use Sheets, create session, and Drive, find drive items. Now, what find drive items is going to do is it's going to allow us to query our Google Drive for any particular information that we might need. However, as part of this, we're going to need to provide a drive item list variable, which is a list of google.apis.drive.file. Now, seeing that namespace, I immediately recognize that I don't have that in my imports currently. And just to go ahead and show you what that looks like when you go and try and create this, you're going to get back a little error saying that we don't know the namespace Google. So in this particular case, this is expected when you work with a new package and you need to add some imports occasionally. What you can go ahead and do is search Google, and we can immediately see all of the different API namespaces that we need to go ahead and add. If you're comfortable with traditional programming, this is just like adding your using statements at the top of your whatever file you're working on. So we know we're going to be working with Drive. We also know we're going to be working with Forms. So I can go ahead and add both of those in right now. And we're also going to be working with sheets. So let me grab that as well before I forget. There we go. So now going here, we can create our file list just like that. We can provide our Google instance. And now we need to provide a search query because we need to return some particular file. So the format that Google likes to use for their search queries is available as a sample right here in our tooltips that you can use on any field in our studio. In addition, you can click our search term queries terms documentation link and open up the Google reference for these things right here. Commands that reference some form of query that you'll use will have a link to the underlying documentation just to make things easier. So in this case, following the example that we had in the tooltip, we know we can provide name equals and then a set of single quotes. And in those single quotes, we can provide the name of what we're trying to access. In this case, I'm trying to access my customer data Google Sheet. Okay, so that'll give us our file list. Now, we're only going to have one file returned in this list. So we're going to once again provide our Google instance. And now we're going to create a Sheets instance for tracking the worksheet that we're working on. So rather than opening up a new spreadsheet, we're going to click that we want to open a spreadsheet. And now we need to provide a file item. So we're going to take our handy file list and provide it the first item in that list. At this point, we've opened up our spreadsheet. When we run this, we can go ahead and give it a quick run as a test. And we
And
can see that that succeeds.
cool. Yeah. And when you say open, how do we open that spreadsheet?
So it's all happening under the hood. So that's kind of the beauty of APIs. Is were I to make a modification to this sheet, the version that I have open up in my browser right now would update live. It's really what we're doing is we're creating a reference to it rather than explicitly opening it up in the browser. And from then on, any operations that you try and perform on that saved instance variable will reflect on the Google Sheets site because we manipulate those APIs under the hood. Okay.
Cool.
So now that I have that working just fine, so there is one nuance to what I just did there. The first time that you ever run a Google Workspace command for a particular account, it is going to open it up to Google and ask you to sign in. This is so that you can provide first-time authorization on that account. I've already done so for this account in my testing. And unfortunately, I can't recreate that live, but it's a very quick step. You just go through, sign in, select yes to all of the different services that you would like to give access to, and then click the OK button.
Did Cameron, I have two
Yes.
things. Did you do something to the resolution on your screen because it quickly became a little bit unclear when where you saved the desktop? Oh, now
Let me
it's
go.
no, maybe it's okay now again. It's
Oh,
it's okay.
apologies. It might have just de-rendered for just a second. I just went ahead and refull Studio after executing.
Cool.
Okay.
And I have another question, Cameron. You
Sure.
had that credential JSON file. Where will the correct
Yes.
place for me be to store that from a user standpoint? I mean, should I just place it outside my desktop? Is it secure, or should I keep it somewhere safe? Sorry.
So I would recommend. So there's two ways you can go about this. There's, let's say, the enterprise COB way, and there's the way that for most of us will be just fine. Generally, if you keep a handle on your automation packages after they've been published and you're able to restrict those in your environment, you can simply place the Google credentials file in your project path. The advantage of that is that you can reference it directly using that project path variable. It will deploy with your automation in an attended or unattended environment with no additional work needed. Um, and for most of us, that's good enough. Now, if you're in a very secure environment with strict compliance, what you can do is you can take your Google Credentials JSON file and you can upload that in the cloud server, which I would need to log back into real quick, as a file asset. And then simply put it as part of your automation to retrieve that file asset at the beginning of its execution into the project path and reference it from there.
Cool. Great answer, Cameron. And before you continue, I just want to say hi to Andreas Höglund from Stockholm, who also joins us today. Nice to have you here, Andreas. And please, if you have any questions to Cameron, just bring him. I'll make sure that he will answer anyone. So back to you, Cameron.
Perfect. So now that we have a handle on our sheet, the first thing we're going to do is go retrieve our form inputs because we need something that we want to write to this sheet. So going back to our Google Workspace command, we have only a single form command that we want to reference here, and that is get form responses. Now, unlike before where we simply gave it an app name or gave it a file, in this case, we need to give it a form ID. So we're going to provide our Google instance variable. We'll provide it our list of responses, using that Control K hotkey again to go ahead and make things easy. And now we need to provide it with our form ID. And this can be gotten here from the browser without issue. You can see this either from the editing screen or from the preview screen. So hopping back into our studio, we can do this. Now, we'll talk on in a little bit how you can use a filter and why that might be applicable depending on your use case and what that kind of does for us. So we can go ahead and save that. Now, we've retrieved our list of responses, but sometimes we might not have any responses. One thing that we can do to adjust for this is simply say that we don't want to throw an error in that particular case and add a conditional check to determine whether or not we got any responses. So if our response list does not equal to null, then we can
And what
assume
is
that
a
we have some
response? Can you
response.
repeat that again?
So a response in this case is just a custom proprietary Google type. I'll show you it in just a second. We do have a very fun feature for that. So if I add a breakpoint and then click debug, I can run up to the point of that response list, which will be after we get our form responses. Now, on our left side here, we're paused in our debug. We can see that our variables have values and are populated. Double clicking on our response list. One nice thing that we do is we do our best to the best of our ability, we try and show you the contents of your variables. So rather than just tell you that we have one response in your list, we will try and actually show you that response. So here you can see we have a Google API Forms form response object. That's what our list contains. It's the output of a submission of our form. We have a particular ID, creation time, submission time, and then 7 answers contained therein. So these correspond to the 7 questions that we ask: the customer's name, address, email address, some tax information, and an invoice total.
Cool.
So I can go ahead and just click resume. And in this case, we didn't have a null, so we hopped into that if, which is great. So we're getting our one form response that we want to take a look at. Now, what we're trying to do here is append any responses that we get from our Google form into our Google Sheet. So we don't want to rewrite it every time. So to do that, we're going to want our create data table command, because that's going to allow us to define the structure of our data rows and then add any responses, for each response that we get from the Google form, compile that into one table, and then just simply append that table at the very end to the Google form, or to the Google Sheet. Apologies. So
Your colleague Natalie last week told us about an advantage of using a data table instead of just doing it directly into Excel. We might have forgotten. Can you repeat what she said here?
So I don't recall her exact verbiage, but she and I tend to share minds sometimes when it comes to RPA. And really, in my eyes, the advantage of using a data table is its flexibility and your access to underlying programming concepts. So
Cool.
rather than simply making the modifications in Excel or doing things very piecemeal, you can access things like link queries or make direct calculations using your sum, sort, and filter functions.
Cool. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. So in this particular case, looking at our Google form, we know that we have 7 columns that we need to worry about. That will be the 7 outputs by the names that are provided in there. In this case, I already know them, so I'm just going to type them all here. We have our customer name. We have our customer address. We have our email address. And this is a very dry segment, so if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me during this point.
Cool. I will just say hello to a few folks from the chat while you work a bit here. So Dalius is with us today. Hello, Dalius. Nice to see you here. And then Michael is here. He asked me a question about the reframing, which is a UI part one. Maybe you can tell us what if we should relate it to OpenBots. If I want to scale my robots with OpenBots, do you have a template for that? And maybe you can take that after this session because it's not really related to the Google one. So I will you can have this question in mind, what I will do if I want to scale my robots with OpenBots, and then we can take that afterward.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Okay, so now that we've created our data table and we've confirmed that we do have some responses to go through, we're going to go ahead and loop through those responses. So in this case, our input collection is just going to be our response list. In our output collection item variable, what we're going to reference in our for each, our for is just going to be a response. Go ahead and save that. Now, for each response that we got, we're going to want to add a row to our data table that we're going to go ahead and append. So we're going to use the add data row command. We're going to select our data table. And here you can see that I can just use this handy dandy helper to pre-fill all these columns that I typed the first time. We do have the ability to find where you declared your data table and get that information ourselves. Please do not feel the need to retype all of your column names.
Cool.
And then we're going to go ahead and output that. So now we need to provide the data from the end response. And unfortunately, this is one of those points where we need to have a little discussion about when the maker of a library doesn't give you information that you really wish you had. So here you can see I need to provide some data. So for the moment, I'm just going to provide some empty strings, and then we're going to talk through what I mean by that. And this is where a little bit of programming ingenuity tends to come in. Okay, so I can go ahead and set a breakpoint right here and run to that breakpoint where we're looking at our response. So we can skip past this breakpoint. Oh, and in this case, I gave the wrong type. Apologies, this can happen. So our response I have currently typed as a data row by accident. To go ahead and fix that, we just select form response from our dropdown. That'll go ahead and pre-fill. As you use different types in the studio, this dropdown will fill with more types that you've already used in your script to make things easy for you. If you do need to find a type that's not currently listed, you can click more options, go to whatever API you might need and grab it, or type in the search here to find it easily. In this case, I know that I just need my form response. We can go unset this breakpoint from our if statement here and run down to line 13. Now, when we're looking at our response variable, we can see here that we do have our 7 answers, but it doesn't show us them, which I would say is not the most helpful thing in the world. So what we can go ahead and do is add another for each and comment out this add data row command. And we're going to go ahead and peek further into this variable so that we can deduce how to get the actual answers out of our form response. So dragging in another for each, what we're going to need to access is what's called an answer object. So to go ahead and access an answer object, what we need to do is reference response dot answers. Now, you need the answers are actually a dictionary keyed to the individual ID of the field. Unfortunately, and I spent a lot of time looking for it, in the Google form, they do not give you the IDs that they store this as. So unless you can deduce this by yourself, it can be very difficult to find your answers. So what I've gone ahead and done is figured out the easiest, most straightforward way for developers like me that don't want to dig too much into documentation like that and not come up short. So if we go ahead and just grab the values of that dictionary, that's going to give us the end answer objects, and we're just going to go ahead and to list that so that we can iterate through that list. We're going to need a corresponding answer object, which you have right here. And now for each answer, we're going to want to go ahead and log something out, which is we're going to want to go ahead and deduce what that answer contains. What is the actual data of that submission? Because we're going to need that to actually add to our data table. The easiest way to find that is to start with our answer object and click dot. Our IntelliSense is going to try and help you along. So we can see that we have our text answers. That's great. We're going to want a string, so it's got to be in a text answer. Now, in our text answer, if we hit dot again, we have another answers dictionary. Now, we know that when we look at our form, it's a bunch of text, right? We take in paragraphs or we take in individual lines of text. So we're not really grabbing multiple checkboxes. So we can deduce that the answers array at this end here it's only going to contain one item, and we're only going to need that first item. Now, before we just hit OK, we're going to want to click dot one more time just to check things, and we can see that we have a dot value property. So clicking that dot value property, we can click OK, and that comes back as a string. That's a pretty good sign. So when we go ahead and click this run button, it's going to grab that first form response, and it's going to log out all 7 of the answers contained in that form response. And we can see that here. We have ID boutiques. We have what appears to be their company registration number, their VAT tax ID, email, address, a price total, and some consulting hours. So knowing this information, we now know the ordering of our data. So this should be very easy to access ourselves, to add to our data row in our data table, and then add to our Google Sheet at the end. To reference this information after you've already closed this form, you can click that logs button there and just see the text version of all the logs that you've run for the current day that we can go ahead and refer back to even after we close that if we need it. So now we're done with that for each. We know the ordering. We're ready to go. So what we're going to go ahead and do is add to our data row. And just like before, when we had our response, we now need to get the answers out of that response. So 1 second here, just to double check what I'm looking at on my end. Okay. What we're going to need is to take that response object, and we can just go ahead and click dot again and get the answers of that response. We're going to get the values. We're going to get the list of the values. And here's where we differ from what we did before. Whereas in the for each, we then iterated through using a for each. Here, we know we want a particular value. We know we want a particular member of this array. So when we were talking about the customer name, without even looking back, we know that was the first one. So we know that's going to be our answer at position 0. And then we can grab the text answers. We grab the answers itself. And we can grab the first answer contained and the value. So a little clunky. It takes a little intuition to figure it out. It's purely an artifact. Google not giving you that lovely ID, or we could skip this entire first 5 lines here. But we can just go ahead and copy that into all of these.
Since we are lazy.
Absolutely. Some of the best development out there comes from a little bit of laziness.
Yep.
So what's going to change here is that first number, that 0, depending we need, right? So we know before that we have our notepad here, so we can figure out our rough ordering. So we know our address is the 4th one that comes up. So here we can see as we loop through this, boutiques, then the company ID, then the VAT ID, then the email address, then the address. So keying this to a 0 based array, our address entry, therefore it is at 4. We know that our email address comes just before that. So we're going to change that to a 3. We know that our company registration number is our second item. And so we're going to change this to a 1. We know our VAT tax ID is our third item. So we're going to change this to a 2. And we know our invoice total is our second to last. So we can make this a 5. And our description is our last item. So we can make that a 6. Clicking OK, that submits through just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to place a breakpoint, and we're going to make sure that we did things right, our columns align, and we're happy. We can take a look at our data table. And here we can see all of our column names, and we can confirm that things are in order. Column name or customer name, ID boutiques, address, Timbercrest, email address, Esteban 1993, company registration number 907748, tax ID, total, in description. And we can see that we aligned things just right. If not, you just simply go back and change those couple IDs and you should be good to go. So we can close this execution. And now we can move on to actually adding this data to our data table, or I should say to our sheet. So going back to our sheets commands, you can see we got quite a lot of them. But the particular command that we're worried about here is going to be our append range command, because we're really looking to append this range to the end of what is currently in the sheet. So we can just select our data table, select our sheets instance. Is it sheets instance or sheet instance? It's sheet instance. And now we need to provide the sheet name that we're going to be working with. Going back to our Google Sheet, we can see that that is just named data. And we don't want to add any headers to append to the very end. So at this point, we can go ahead and run it and see this data pop out on line 9. Bam, just like that. And that's for a previously done submission. We'll put a new one through in just a moment as we look to enhance the script for how you would really run it in a production environment. Because right now, I'm going to keep retrieving those same submissions.
Yeah.
So any questions?
Yes. First of all, what's the price of this tool if I want to get started? Like the viewers out here, they want to see it. Is it still free?
So the OpenBot Studio is absolutely free to download at the start. You just simply register on our site and log in, and you should be able to go ahead and download the studio. We do have a free trial that will allow you to utilize our cloud server as well with a certain number of execution minutes and other things like that for free. However, when you're first exploring, using the studio is just fine, although I do recommend playing with the cloud server with all the powerful features that we have on our platform. And like I mentioned before, all of this Google Workspace stuff comes completely free with your Google subscription. If you try to use it at an enterprise level, you may have a Google business subscription already and have access to these things through a business workspace. But even end consumers get this for free.
Cool. And so all the steps you showed us here today, we can replicate those and get the exact same results as you, right?
Exactly. The only thing that you'll need to do is go ahead and just pre-create that Google Sheet like I did, add the right column names, and align the little piece. Make your form, for example. You'll notice one of the great things about doing it maybe that more intuitive way of that object is I'm not referencing unique IDs that I got in some tricky way. We just found the data that we were looking for the old-fashioned way, and if you put that same step, you'll get your data out in the same order.
Cool. Thank you.
Now, there is a little bit of a nuance there. You're going to have to wait just a minute until this is available publicly. I am, of course, on a little bit of a preview build, but all of this should be available within the next couple weeks.
Nice.
Okay, so now we want to turn this into a bit more of an enterprisey project. This isn't a one-time execution. We have the same form submissions over and over again. So we need some way of filtering such that we don't get the same form submissions. So the easiest way to do that, in my eyes, when I immediately think of something like this, is to use a date. So response command, we can see that our filter asks us for a
Did
timestamp.
you, Cameron,
And
did you resize again? Just sorry to interrupt you. Did you resize the window?
I don't believe I did. Just a moment. Here, I can minimize and remaximize it and then do that. Is that better?
I think it's a little bit unclear, at least to me. Maybe I can.
The problems of video compression.
No, now it's great. Maybe it took a few seconds, but thank you.
Oh, well, that's fantastic to hear. Okay, so the best way to do this is going to be to reference that timestamp, like I just mentioned, the ability through the Google Forms filter queries to say, hey, I want to get anything after this timestamp or before a certain timestamp. So when I think of using a timestamp, I think of when is the last time we checked for a form submission, right? So if we just checked for them, we only want to get things since the last time we checked. Now, to store this information, we need to store this outside of our automation. This can't just be in a variable. That would set every time we run it. In our OpenBot server product, a wonderful way of doing that. So I'm going to go ahead and log back in here to my demo environment. And what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and create an app to store that date. I already have one, but I'll show off the steps. So we can go to our asset screen. I'm going to hop to my preferred organization. Creating an asset is as simple as hitting add asset, selecting that we want to store some text, in this case, a string form of a timestamp, and then providing a name and value. I already have it stored here with our last check date. We can see that I currently have the last check date set to sometime earlier today. This is UTC time when you store it in this particular format as mandated by Google. I believe it's, let me double check. Anyone wondering that doesn't have immediate access to our documentation, I can click this link. They specifically request that you provide it in RFC 3339 Zulu format, which is jargon to me as much as it is probably to you.
Mhm.
But through a Google search, a Stack Overflow link comes up in the first result that tells you the exact format string to give it when you do .toString. So I'll show that right now.
Thanks.
So what we're going to go ahead and want to do is we're going to want to go ahead and provide with the current time. So just a second, let me go grab that format string for my reference because I always forget these things. There we go. So when we first go ahead and get it, we're actually going to get it using datetime.now. And the reason for that is we just want to check for anything, or I should say based on the asset value. So here, what we're going to need is our get asset and apologies, I'm all mixed up today. And we're going to need to provide our time to check as our value that we're going to retrieve from the cloud server. And that's going to be the string asset value, the text asset, and then the name of our asset, as we can see up in the server, be last check date. And now what we want to be able to confirm is that we can filter it out such that we do not get any responses that are older than that last check date. So the easiest way to do that is to provide a filter query. And our filter query is going to be in the following format. We're going to provide a little $sign that lets us use what's called string interpolation, a very easy way to chain together variables and text into a string. We're going to provide timestamp is greater than, and then 2 curly braces, which lets us directly reference our variable value. So it's going to check or date to check.
Cameron, if we come from other RPA tools, will we have an easy time to figure out OpenBots? Because I know a lot of people here might work in several other tools. So is it easy to figure out?
So what I would say is it's absolutely not difficult to get into. We use C# as our primary backing language, which I come from a UiPath background back in the day myself. Transitioning from VB to C# just takes a tiny bit of work, although I wouldn't say that it's overly crazy. The syntax is a little different, but the general structures and concepts are the same. And
Cool.
we do try and help you as much as possible, providing things like our tooltips that provide you samples of how to do things, or providing links to documentation here. And I made one mistake, put date to check, not time. Like I said, a little backwards. So what we can do is we can go ahead and try and run this. So we'll add a breakpoint here at our null check. And what we're going to expect is that we really any forms because nothing's been submitted since our last check. And here we can see that we got that error thrown saying that there was nothing found. And we can see here that our response list is not currently set. That means that there was simply no submission to retrieve. So knowing that information, we now know that our filter worked as we'd expect because the submission that we're referencing was put in sometime yesterday. And we can see here we have one response, and that's that response here. Now, we need some way of updating that time when we're done, and we need to set it in that very particular format. So once we're done with our execution, regardless of if we found something or not, we're going to want to change that last to reference later as the last time that we checked our form submissions. So we can use the update asset command right here and put that at the very end after we've completed the rest of our process. We're going to move our append range the inside of this if, since we only want to do that, actually have a list of responses in a data table. Our asset name is going to be last check date. And the asset value in this case is a bit complicated. So it's date time now because we want to use the current time. Now, because this very particular format has to be in UTC, we're going to provide 2 universal time. ToString to turn it into a string. Now, I'm going to copy and paste, make sure I don't make a mistake, but I'm going to talk you through it. You can provide a formatting string whenever you do date time dot now dot to string or anything similar. And in this is our formatting string. So first we list the year and its long form, then a dash, then the month, then a dash, then the date, and then we need to provide the current time, as in the hours, minutes, Z at the end. So just to remind you what that looks like at the very end, this is that end format. And this is what they require in their documentation. So what we can go ahead and do is provide a place to save when we're done in case we need to use it again. In this not though.
So what you're doing to us here is just you saved us for a lot of hard work. We can just do what you do here, and then we will have OpenBots working with the Google Workspace. We don't need to find these things. We can just type what you do here.
Exactly. And, like I mentioned, this is one of those things where going to their documentation, it tells you the RFC. You can Google, how do I format a date time into this RFC, and something come up. But I tend to, when I do demonstrations, I try to pick the things that have the most workarounds or have the most things that you might need to learn, from experience or spending a lot of time looking around to showcase, just to save people some time.
Yeah.
We might have some time at the end to go over some of the other workspace commands, which are about as cut and dry as can be comparatively.
Cool.
And what we're doing here, like I mentioned, is we're just setting the current time to our last check time once we've done our check to make sure that we're only getting the absolute latest submission. So if I go ahead and run this, we can see that it updates our asset. We can go ahead back to the asset screen, go back here, and we can see that this has been updated to the most recent time in UC, which is 3:27:30. You can see that matches my virtual machine, which is in UTC time.
Cool.
So now we're in a very good spot. We have an ability to filter it out so that we're only getting the latest form submissions. We can go ahead and do another submission real quick just to double check that our newest submissions come through. To do that, we can just go to the preview here. To show you how to find that when you're editing a form, you can just click this preview button. We can provide OpenBots Inc. We can provide an email address. I'll just put mine here. Oh. And this is all wrong information, but good to put something. Serenity Lane. Okay, come to registration number should just be some 6-digit number. I believe a tax ID is a 9-digit number. Our invoice total, we'll put exactly $100, and then we'll say for doing the demo, 1 hour. A man can dream. Okay. So we have our response available right here. Now we just want to go ahead and double check that when we run this, we pick up that latest response, which comes after our previous time. We can see here it picked up that response and added that data to our sheet. And that is how you can go ahead and integrate Google Forms, Google Drive, and Google Sheets into your automations relatively seamlessly.
Easy. So to me, the most difficult part was the setup, and then when you have done that once, it's pretty straightforward in OpenBots to do these things.
Exactly. And the same can be said for many integrations. Oftentimes, we try to make it so that the most difficult part is the part in the other person's platform or in the platform you're integrating with, not in our platform. Once you come to us, we like it to be as straightforward as possible.
Cool. And
Okay.
just take a small break here, Cameron. You can grab a glass of water, and then I will say hello to Silverio. Nice to have you here on the stream. He's sending good vibes to you, Cameron, I think. And Crusoe says that he's doing a little bit of dab. Hello, Crusoe, and I hope you fixed your glasses, or maybe it was us. It was a little bit blurry, he said earlier, but I think it looks like it works seamlessly now. So nice to have you here, Crusoe, as well.
And I do try to talk through things as much as possible to make it so that even if you can't read it, hopefully you get the vibe and the gist.
Yeah, you're a great, Cameron.
Thank you. So I do have a little more prepared. I can show just a little more of how you can interact with the Google Workspace as well before we do any more general questions, or
Yes,
we can
please.
hop into that right now and do
No,
a
no,
DS1.
no, no, no. We want to see more, Cameron.
So it's a pretty big package. We have a lot of commands in our Google Workspace package, as you can see here, covering a lot of their platform. So I just wanted to show off a few more things that you can do. As you'd expect, you can go ahead and interact with email. We can send ourselves an email, get it back, show the subject, and delete it. We have the ability, just like we did before for Google Sheets, where we can go in and grab a presentation or a doc out of our Google Drive, create a session as you would before. We can add a new slide based on a certain positioning. You can even say what type of format you want the slide to be in. We can create shapes in the slide of a certain size and location. We have the ability to add text into a particular shape, delete the slide when we're done, and I'll show you what some of this stuff looks like. All of this is about as straightforward as can be when interacting with it. I have, in fact, used this to automate the creation of my own update PowerPoints when I have to give those. It is very convenient.
Mhm.
So then let me go ahead and add 2 breakpoints here. And there's a really interesting nuance with Google Workspace where if you've worked with some email platforms before, it can be a bit of a point of frustration that there is a necessary delay between the time where you send an email and you have the ability to retrieve that email from another means, or upload a file and retrieve that file, where things work asynchronously in the background and they make no guarantees about when you'll actually be able to get what you just gave them. One of the lovely things about the Google Workspace is it provides you a contract that says that you will be able to retrieve something basically immediately after using it. So if I go ahead and run this first set of email commands, I'm sending and then getting an email back from that inbox instantaneously, maybe a hundredth of a second between. And you can see even before it renders in the user interface and you have the ability to see it in your Gmail, our bot was already able to retrieve it and work with it, grab the subject of our demo email, and then delete it. And just like that, when Gmail decides to update, it'll be gone. Um, in addition, like I mentioned, we do have that ability to work with Google Slides. We have a lot of flexibility in how that works. We can reference a presentation that we already have, add an image from our website using a fixed URL, and then add some text. Going to our Google Slides here, we can see that I have just a basic presentation. We've added that slide, added an image to it, and gone ahead and added some text in our fixed position as well. Given you're manipulating shapes, you can get pretty creative, embed images in very particular locations and format it how you want. You can even manipulate these predefined sections, such as the titles or subtitles in particular. I chose to add a new one in this case. Starting with a blank Word document, we have the ability to do those same operations, append images, append text, and have it appear instantly in our cloud view of those same documents, which I find to be very refreshing. When we talk about working with cloud tools, the concept of I can watch it happen in real time is very novel to me. After years of working with platforms where I have to wait for uploads.
And Cameron, I have a use case for the slides. Would I be able to? I do a lot of live presentations and demos and stuff like that. Would I be able to use this where I could have a presentation and then I can send out the Google Forms to the people, and they will answer, and then we can use OpenBots to automatically update our uh, slides with the
Absolutely.
results.
So just like we showed today, you have the ability to get those responses. You could simply have an automation that's just sitting in a loop and let's say every 30 seconds checking for a new form response. You get that response, you add a new slide to the end of your presentation, you add the review of how things are going or any feedback that people are giving you. You could have a field where you let people provide an image, although over the open internet, I would not recommend that. I would keep it to text. um, and be able to have those just embed into your Word or your PowerPoint or directly into some sheet for you to reference later.
Cool, that's great, Cameron. And Yuka says, thank you for this demonstration. Thank you, Yuka, for being here. And if you have any question to Cameron, just drop them in the chat. I'll make sure that we'll go through them.
So at this point, I think I really covered the meat of it. I could get a lot more into the little nitty gritty of things, but I like to leave a little room for people to explore. If you'd like, I can talk a little bit about some of the upcoming stuff in our version 2.0 and things we'll be showing off over the next couple weeks, or we can simply wait for a couple more questions and field them as they come.
Um, I would like to talk about a bit about if you want to scale, like you come from a UiPath background as well, and probably some of the developers here as well. So if you want to do something like the reframing in UiPath, if you want to scale the whole thing, do you have a template for that, or is it? What do you recommend us to do if we want to do nice error handling, logging, and these things in with OpenBots?
So we do have a couple internal templates that we do distribute to some of our partners and clients. What I can tell you is someone from a big implementation and background is I don't think I've ever worked with the vanilla RE framework. I think every organization made their own adjustments to them,
Hmm.
modified it in ways that they were happy with, and built their own templates. We do have support for the ability to use templates automatically from NuGet feeds. When you go to create a project, you're able to select to load from the gallery and then select a feed and then open out from a template. In addition, we have our library component. So this is a very important component because it actually comes with the samples out of the box that tell you how to do a ton of stuff, like use Microsoft 365. In this case, because I'm on 2.0, I have to update the latest version, but you can see that populates here with just a quick sample automation that you can run. In addition, you have the ability to add your own libraries. So we can add a library directory and then link that directory through into our studio. This lets us store snippets of code, pull them in and out, and use them directly for reusability. We very much encourage very good modularization of your automations and reuse of your code. This can be linked to some share drive that everyone in your organization has access to. In the future, we plan to make libraries available natively through a cloud connection as well, or through an orchestrator connection. Adding things to a library is as simple as dragging them out and providing a name for the OB script to save it as. It'll also bring out any variables that you were using and wire everything up. It'll create arguments just as when you go through and click export with run task. It'll set it up so that you can just simply invoke that script at your leisure or drag it in to populate into your script.
Cool. That sounds clever with the library. It looks very easy to use to me at least.
And really, when we talk scaling, of course, templates are a big part of that. But to me, when an organization has really scaled out, it is not that they are using a template in their automations. It's that they are not rewriting things like an SAP login or adding a business partner to SAP or some other CRM that they're using. You're simply chaining together components natively as best you can. And it comes down to a solution design aspect more than a new implementation aspect.
Cool, Cameron. And I hope that was enough answer to you, Michael. If you still need more, then drop a message in the chat. And Cameron, Yuka says he's quite excited with OpenBots and will check it out. He says that are there courses similar to the UiPath Academy?
There absolutely is. So if you go ahead and you go to our site at openbots.ai and you log in, you'll be brought to your dashboard. We do have our OpenBots Academy with a lot of courses, in addition to larger courses that'll introduce you to core concepts and how to use the studio. You do also have access to just small little tutorials and demos that we do all the time with our new updates, showing you how to use some small individual feature that just came out. We try to keep those relatively brief just so that you can get as much info as you need to use the new features in every update. Um, and we're publishing new ones out all the time. It's a big focus of ours to make sure that people know how to leverage what we have out there because there tends to be a lot of functionality in our studio and our server and in our assistant that some people just don't know about.
Cool. So free courses, and I know there's also we can also have a free certification somewhere at your platform as well if you want
Yes,
to.
sir. So that's in the exact same spot. So when you go ahead and log in, you can see, let me see where it comes up. Let me go ahead and log in real quick and I'll just go ahead and show you. And you can see here, we mentioned with every free trial, it comes with those video tutorials. You're going to get linked through right to the Academy from your dashboard and have the ability to go through and watch as many as you want. And also to get those certifications like you mentioned through our certification tests. So here you just go to our OpenBots Academy at academy.openbots.ai. And we have different improvements, our 1.8 improvements, tutorials on how to do different things in our studio, as well as larger courses covering the essentials of RPA or developer certification, infrastructure setup and configuration, and even some BA certifications as well.
Did you do any of these courses for us at the Academy, Cameron?
So, although I do help a lot with the back end of writing them and getting the information for them, largely my contributions are things like those 5-minute tutorials and covering of our new features rather than those broader courses.
And I'm sure we don't need to speed things up to 1.5 when watching your tutorial videos. That's great.
We try to keep them nice and brief. As a developer myself, I like to cover the meat of things. I don't like to have a lot of fluff around tutorials and demos. You're here to learn about how to use a feature more than anything else.
Great. And Yuka says, great to hear. He will check OpenBots and your courses out, Cameron.
Fantastic.
We are about to come to an end to this show, Cameron. Did you sweat a bit when you live build, or was it okay?
So, because of my heavy customer background and doing a lot of implementations, I'm very comfortable with demonstrations. This is one of those things that I genuinely enjoy doing. As weird as it
Great.
sounds for some people who do not get like giving live demos, I'm always excited to show things off in our studio. Every opportunity that I get the chance to show off things, especially right before they come out, gets me very excited.
Great. And if we want to know more about OpenBots, where should we go in 2 sentences right
You
now?
should you should absolutely go to our site, explore our offerings, and go through our academy to learn more about how to use our platform.
Great, Cameron. And I want to say thank you to all the viewers out there, both the ones that watched it live and all the ones that will watch this in the future. If you have any questions about OpenBots, go check their site and you can take all their free education. You can download OpenBots Studio. It's totally free for private individuals. That's right, Cameron?
Yes, sir.
Great. And just go ahead and start building. Cameron, thanks for a lovely and learningful hour. I enjoyed it a lot.
I very much enjoyed it as well. Thank